Our guest this hour is Gilbert Ngaira, local representative for their World Children Global Charity. Good morning, Gilbert.
Good morning, good morning.
Karibu sana to the Situation Room.
Asante sana.
We're glad that you could join us.
Thank you.
What do you call a rooster in your back neck of the woods?
Whoa, a rooster.
Just call a rooster.
No.
He is buying time.
Oh.
So that
They can figure out, yes.
I know what a chicken is.
I know the cuckoo in
the
general.
cuckoo I know in general, but this
Of the
rooster.
cuckoo, which one is?
it doesn't have to be one word.
Yeah.
It could be a compound word that explains what a rooster is. But let's start with chicken. What is chicken called?
Ingoho.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bas.
So a rooster would be what? Ingoho strong?
Ingoho mundu.
It could also be guku.
Okay. So, the World Children Global Charity. You're here because we want to have a conversation on what's happening in London. Our President Uhuru Kenyatta is co-chairing a meeting with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson on global partnerships on education. This is a summit that's been taking place since yesterday and today,
Yeah.
which is also a fundraising event
Yes.
where they're seeking to raise 5 billion shillings over the next 1 year
Yes.
to support education in how many countries?
90 countries.
5 billion divided by 90.
$5 billion.
$5 billion divided by 90.
500 billion shillings.
Billion.
So tunaweza pata 100 billion hivi
Kitu kama hiyo.
tukicheza poa.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What's this conference all about?
So this conference is looking at the disadvantaged or the low-income countries and the gap in education, and their world as a global charity focuses more in mobilizing resources to empower governments to fund education in the low-income countries. So as part of the GPE, the Global Partnership on Education, their world is one of the main partners there. So the main idea is to mobilize resources and fund governments in the low-income countries to be able to support support education, and mostly for us, our focus is on early childhood education.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this support, because I have very many questions.
Yeah.
But let's start with this support. What exactly
does
are we
it
talking about? Are we hiring teachers? Are we improving infrastructure? Are we developing infrastructure from the beginning? Are we buying books? What are we doing?
Can I pick it back on your
Actually,
question?
Sure.
So that we really load it on. Okay. And are there checks and balances so that even as the money is being given,
Yes.
is it given in tranches saying we give it for the first 3 months and this is
see
how
how
we're
you
going to
do
check and we're going to determine? Are there any such things put in place?
So yeah, just to start with your questions, the funds, yes, are given as a block, depending on the necessary needs of a country, and yes, all those factors are the main factors we look at when you look on education.
Okay.
Talking of funding, salaries for teachers, infrastructure. We have programs like the school feeding programs. All these things are supposed to be informed, learning materials and all this. So what happens is that the GP is at the global level. Once these funds are given at a country level, we have each country has their own mechanism on how this money now is disbursed in various places. In Kenya, for example, it's through if it's the primary and going upwards, it's through the national government. If it is pre-primary, it will now go to the government, national government, then be directed to the county government to support the early childhood learning and the TVETs and all that. Yeah.
Okay.
Then if there are checks and balances, yes, we have internally we have the constitution, we have the Basic Education Act, we have policies in place that are supposed to guide on how these monies are allocated in various places and how they are utilized.
You see why I raised the question, Mr. Ngaira, is this. The same checks and balances that you've referred to already exist when it comes to monies being given to the counties, when it comes to budgets that are allocated to ministries within the government. And yet, we perennially find ourselves in a situation where we're asking, there was all this money that was spent, where on earth did it go?
Did it go to?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, in the same way, I'm asking the accountability quotient that is required of those who will be given this money. The checks and balances specifically, is there an arm that, or is there funding, or is there a capacity by the donor to monitor, determine that, as I said, because donations are specific, they're targeted.
They are targeted, right?
Yes, so is there a way in which we can determine that the money actually gets utilized or used for what it's supposed to? Aside from the umbrella checks and balances that we find within our constitution, are there anything else? Do they have bodies, that independent bodies that come and monitor and say, okay, you say this is what you've done.
Yes.
We are sending our monitors to you to determine.
Yes, to come and do it. Yes, there is, because you also, the Global Partnership on Education is not just partnering with government, it's partnering with private sector and as well as the civil society. And within these two bodies, you know mostly from the private sector, if they are giving money, there must be a clear way of accountability. And one of the best way has been through the civil society organizations as well, because they also work very closely in the community level and can able to help and inform the implementation of these processes on the ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
Forgive me, Gilbert, but I want to take us back,
Yeah.
because I think we skipped a step.
Yes.
You are here, you work for their world,
Yes.
and we're talking about the Global Partnership on Education.
Education.
Who's their world, and who started Global Partnership on Education, and how do you guys come in?
Good. So Their World is an organization that was started by the Sarah Brown. Sarah Brown is the wife to the former Prime Minister in the UK, Gordon Brown. Yeah, and it came about out of her passion on education globally. So basically, it's just to mobilize resources and ensure that every child is given a chance to access quality education.
Okay.
That is what Their World is. And now, Global Partnership for Education is a body that brings together like-minded organizations that are focused towards education, global education for all children.
Who started the GPE?
It's many people. It's as I said, it's a space where people with different interests. Their World is focused on education. Then you come and find another private partner who's focused on giving towards education, and they all come together and mobilize resources around it.
The reason I'm asking that is because we've seen our president and the current prime minister
Yes.
being very active on this.
Yes.
Here they are now co-chairing this meeting. Earlier, we saw them doing a Zoom call with President Uhuru Kenyatta in
Yes.
some school in Westlands.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, so are the two governments leading it and then everybody else comes in to support? Or was it started by Their World and other organizations and then the governments were co-opted?
Yeah, so you're talking of Their World,
Yeah,
UNICEF.
It's because we're talking about the beneficial owner.
You're talking of more like UNICEF, the big bodies that have engaged a lot on matters development, like UNICEF, Their World, Save the Children Global, World Vision, all these other development agencies, who are also, through their mobilization skills, were able to bring in private partners for the purpose of raising funds. And because these children belong to a nation, they have to incorporate the government, because all these governments are mandated to take charge of matters education in their respective countries.
Okay. And as we have previously seen, they are the ones then who determine what these needs are, essentially, then to see how they will be applied. Are they the ones who say, actually, what we need in this area, this demographic is this? Or are they taking advice from, as you said, national government, county government, when it comes to pre-primary and then moving forward to TVETs and then tertiary? Are they taking the advice from the ground in terms of what is needed? Or are they taking a bird's eye view and giving their opinion as to then how this support will be spent?
Yeah, they're taking it both ways. When I came in, the beautiful conversation that was happening of bottom-up approach and top-down approach. It's both it's both strategies. Because most of these organizations have worked and are still present in respective countries right from the grassroots, they are able to interact one-on-one with the direct needs that are happening through multi-stakeholders engagement. So you're talking of parents, communities, teachers, children. In the case of organizations like UNICEF or World Vision or Their World, right on the ground, so that you get to understand the main needs. Yeah.
And this is, and it may be a sensitive one, but is this being done because governments in these low-income countries, as you've talked about them, are unable to provide quality education for the country's children, or that they're not able to do enough? Is this stepping in because they're unable, or that there is a gap?
Actually, there is a gap.
Clearly,
and the gap narrows down to resources. I'll give you an example. We focus a lot on early childhood education. And you realize, globally, we have around 175 million children that do not attend early childhood education. That is a gap by itself. We are supposed to reach around 140 million children with quality teachers. That means there's a gap in teacher training on that particular level. And then when you look at the gap, you're asking ourselves, so what brings the change? We'll go back to our conversation on resources. So when you look at how much is budgeted for nationally towards these particular elements, then you realize there's a huge gap.
Yes.
Yeah. For example, in Kenya only, we have around 2.7 million children are accessing early childhood education. 1 out of every 5 children in Kenya accesses early childhood education. It's supposed to be a flip. Globally, it's 4 out of 5 children access education. Then we are asking, why is our statistics flipped compared to the global? And when you come down, everything goes around resources. Resources carry 60-70% of the whole issue. That is why mobilizing resources for this process is very key.
I think it still goes back to that question. Maybe you can expound a little bit, because then it is clear that the resource is not available.
Yeah.
Right? To the extent with which we would like it to be. However, for each region for each area, you have different problems.
Yes.
Right?
Definitely.
So it cannot be blanket that it's because of a resource, we don't have enough money. It could be that there's not enough money to buy or to source for books here. And in other parts of the country, in this day and age, we still have children who are not able to learn within a structure. There's no building.
Yeah, true.
They're learning outside.
Yes.
There are others who are learning in makeshift buildings. That's a resource issue as well. So if you have something like that, you then have multiple effects of, if you don't have a building, my goodness, where are you getting books from and things like this? So different areas have different problems.
Yes.
Are you able to then treat it with this blanket resource approach?
No, not at all. And actually, just to add on what you said, there's an element of no infrastructure, but there's also an element of infrastructures that have been established and have no children. Because again, now the issue of politics comes in. When especially at the local level, now that considering early childhood education is a devolved function. When it comes to support of early childhood education in the community, of the factors we have talked about, teachers training, school feeding program, classes, water and sanitation, because all these factors are needed there for the children to learn comfortably. But if you look at all the rest that I've mentioned, apart from the structure, apart from the class, everything else is soft. It's not something you can see.
Sure.
And when it comes to politics, it's people, mwananchi, wants to see something. When the MCA, for example, comes in a ward, and the first question they are asked is, what have you done for us? If this person just goes and establishes a class, and when they are passing, they see the class they are established by this Mheshimiwa, in their head, Mheshimiwa is working. But the question is, the location where this institution has been, this structure has been put, do we have enough children that can access it?
Yes.
Yeah, because when you're talking early childhood education, of course, the age is lower.
Yeah.
It's a place where a mother should be able to access, drop the kid, go to work, come back, collect their children.
Yeah.
But the way it has been done, of course, it brings all those disparities. So what happens is different countries, like in Kenya context, different counties have different numbers of children that are supposed to access early childhood education. So you'll find a county like Taita Taveta or Kwale County compared to Mandera. You see, the needs will be a bit different. When you're looking of geographical area in Mandera and how children can be able to access this facility is also different. So all those factors need to be put in place and this calculated one by one to be able to ensure that each county gets what they deserve to support this process.
I'm going back to what I asked earlier on. I think I didn't ask it well. You talked about the availability of resources, but I sometimes think that the factor that influences these situations more adversely is not the availability of the resources, but rather the management of it.
That is also true. That's also very true.
Yes, and that is why the accountability factor that I'm still going back to comes into play.
Yes.
Because even if you get this money and it goes to the counties, even if it goes down to the sub-counties, there is still no guarantee.
Level of accountability.
Yes, there is still no guarantee that just because you say it has cascaded to that level, that the goal or the purpose for which it was intended will actually be achieved. And that's why I was asking, what is it? In concrete terms, what processes are in place to ensure that whatever is demanded of the recipients is actually fulfilled? Yes.
I'll try to explain it in a way that probably is quite simpler.
That is what I want. I want
we
it to be
have
simple so that I can understand it.
In the case of like pre-primary education in Kenya, apart from just the act and the supporting policy, we have the pre-primary policy, education policy, which highlights very, very important issues that can help anyone who wants to go and verify. One will be the capitation. It provides capitation. For example, each child in early childhood education requires around 2,500 shillings a term to be able to access, to fully go through learning. So what we'll be saying now is how many children, how much money has been brought to this particular county, and how many children do we have in this relevant this particular county that are supposed to access these services. And then when you go there and just multiply the numbers, I'm personally a numbers person and would like to look into, yes, this 2,500 is supposed to look into supporting teachers, school feeding program, infrastructure, water, and all that. So if I come there and parents are still paying for that particular service, then that means there's something, there's a gap. So something has to be checked through. If we come and get, in some places we've seen where some of the finances can be put towards, remember I talked about visible, towards bursaries instead of supporting this particular cause. So that in the community, because when you sit in your compound as a local leader, women are streaming in with their children, and they lack school fees, for example. So then you try to find where to get this money from, and in most cases, in a few places we have seen is that some of these resources that is meant for example, to go towards the early childhood level will be, say, the component food might be taken to
support bursaries.
To support like bursaries. So it is still supporting education, but in a wrong budget line and a wrong focus, which is politically correct at that particular time. So if we just reinforce all the partners involved, because it can't be a one-way traffic. All partners involved, because if I give you my money, I also want to see how that money is utilized. Yeah. So when I come to the community, those are the gaps we're trying to look at. And so the NGOs, the private sector, actually private sector support through the NGOs to ensure that all this is followed through. Yeah.
So the metrics are those. If you look at the budget lines, 2,500 capitation per child,
Per child.
how much goes into this, and the other.
Exactly.
Then do you also factor in, because you started by saying how much money has gone to the county,
Yes.
and then how many children are there?
Exactly.
Why not the other way around? How many children are in this county? That determines how much money goes, because it's capitation per child.
True. So the thing is, with the new the county, the devolved function. Remember when initially the education bit was all national. Then the early childhood education and TVET was devolved.
Yeah.
The biggest gap is to know how many children, and we still need to get those statistics, how many children are
In the age group.
of accessing early childhood education in the various counties. That is still a gap, and I'm sure that is an area most development partners or even the community should be able to establish, because once you know that, then it's easier to come the other way around.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to go back now that you've brought in the numbers. You talked about these numbers earlier. Said in the case of Kenya, we have 2.7 million children accessing early childhood
education.
but you said this is just a fifth. How many classes are we talking about? Because if we say that 2.7 million is a fifth, what we're saying is about 10 million children should be in nursery.
Yes.
In how many years of nursery class?
This is 2. You're talking the 2 years.
So the 2 years.
Before
At what
born.
age do they enter this level of education?
From anytime from 4. From 4 years to 6 years.
There's a gap in my mind,
Yeah.
and maybe walk me through this. If we say that 10 million children should be in nursery at any given time in Kenya, that's about 5 million in a class. So a year, 5 million should be joining Form 1, right? Not Form 1, Standard 1.
Standard 1.
Right?
Yes.
But we see when we get to Standard 8, only about 1 million children sit exams.
Yes. And you see the gap.
Yeah, it's a huge gap.
massive.
It's a huge gap. And you see,
Because if we should have had 5 million entering Standard 1, and we only have 1 million doing
entering,
Standard
yes.
8,
Yeah.
4 million.
and
falls
right
to the
now
ground.
we are saying 1.3 million are joining Standard 1,
Yes.
and about 1.3 million are finishing Standard 8. It works. This other gap of the extra 8 million children that you're saying should be in school and they're not in school is what I'm wondering. Where are these children?
Then also, remember you're comparing from early childhood to class 8, right?
Yes.
There are many other factors in between those years, because we also have a huge drop rate at class 4 going to class 5, and in other places class 7 joining class 8.
Why?
Yeah.
Mostly is do I want to call it societal pressure
Let's call it what
or
it is.
factors? Yeah, because in there are many other factors surrounding early pregnancies, for example, for girls.
Around 4.
No, yeah, class 4 to 8. There's early. I mean, there are many factors. One is early childhood education, not early childhood education, but child labor, early pregnancies,
Yeah.
poverty, as it is, because
Going to the next level, you need a little bit more,
More
to send your
money.
child to go to school.
yes,
And that little bit more that we can see is little money. For
Exactly.
these families involved is actually a lot of money.
exactly.
So they'd rather pull their children out of
school.
to go and work for an extra shilling than keep them in school because they don't have the money to do so. And you'll
Exactly.
be surprised at the numbers that actually do this.
No,
Exactly.
I'd be surprised because, look, I'm looking at it holistically. Gilbert, you're saying currently 2.7. So let's say in each of those two classes, you have about 1.3 million
Yes.
children
Yes.
in nursery. 1.3 million will join Standard 1.
Yes.
I can see that number in Standard 8 because it's about 1 point something million sitting KCPE in Standard 8. And I am seeing throughout this period a government that is very, very focused using the provisional administration to get children to school.
Yes.
And there's a direct effort in that, trying to get children to school and to maintain them in school. So when there's a drop of about 200,000, I can see you now explaining that way.
Yes. Yes.
But you see, all this you're saying is still just a fifth of the children that should be going to school in the first place.
and actually,
That there's about 8 million children who do
That do
not,
not access
go
it.
even to nursery.
Exactly.
Where are these children?
That is the bigger question.
No, you tell me. You're the one who is.
That is the bigger question because these children are with us. They're in the
Our
communities.
statistics from the Kenya KNBS show
Yes.
that in 10 years, our population grows by about 10 million. That means about 1 million children a year. If 1 million children, 1 point something million children are born in a year, how can you expect 5 million children to go to nursery that year?
Cumulatively,
Cumulatively.
ukirudi nyuma kidogo.
Now, still, children who were born in 2021 will join nursery in what? 4 years' time?
2024.
Right?
Yes.
These 1 million that were born this year, the ones that will be joining nursery in 5 years' time. But Gilbert is telling us that 1 million children are born this year, but in 2025 we should be expecting 8 million children to join nursery. Where? Where from?
Let me ask the question. Do we have an ever increasing population? Does it even out or is it declining?
Actually, let me just, I need to correct something here. The ratio of 1:5, it's cut across the 90 countries.
Oh.
The 90 low-income countries that are being
So
supported.
it's not
It's not
Kenya.
Kenya.
Not just Kenya alone.
Okay.
Yes.
That
Maybe,
makes sense.
yeah, that's, maybe I need to clarify
Hey,
that. Yeah.
hey.
So that, so that we work on the
was
numbers,
disturbing,
right?
huh?
Yeah,
Yes.
we have ghost children.
Yeah.
We start that earlier. So by the time they're adults, they're
those
adults
ones,
to
yeah.
those, yes.
Yes.
Gilbert Ngaira is a local representative of Their World Children Global Charity. We're having a conversation about what's happening in London, UK. Our President Uhuru Kenyatta and UK Prime Minister, what's his name? I'm about to say Gordon Brown.
Boris.
Now that you brought in
Boris.
Boris Johnson.
Johnson.
Boris Johnson are co-chairing the Global Partnership on Education, which is, discussing education, supporting education in 90 countries where 80% of the world's out-of-school children are, seeking to raise 500 billion shillings over the next couple of years to support this education. So we are looking at, in the case of Kenya, how does that money come in? How does that money support our education? And what needs to be highlighted? If we look at the last number of years, in fact, we were having this conversation just the other day, when free primary education was rolled out in the country in 2003, it received a lot of support from the UK government and other partners. World Vision, of course, have been here for a long time, and then your organization was born and it came in, it's been offering support. So there's a lot of support that comes from external partners, and there's a lot of money that comes from our local budget. Education receives the highest amount of budgetary allocation each year. Can we see where the money goes? If we just, when you go around the country, as
Yes.
you're touring the projects, as you're inspecting the projects that you're supporting, knowing full well that you're supporting, there are others who are supporting, there's the government itself that's putting in money into it. Do you see where the money goes?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Yes and no. And this will still throw you back to what we were discussing earlier. There was a question that was thrown. We have a huge number of enrollment, but we have a very, very low number of exit of students when it comes to class 8. And as I mentioned earlier, there are so many factors in between. But if you dig deeper, it's the main question to ask is, why do we have all these gaps? Because even if you have the facilities and then you don't have the enough number of students or learners that are exiting through the system, what are the factors? And those are the factors that for us as Their World, we are focused on. We are focused on the right before you go into primary. Because by the time you get to primary, the brain development of a child happens mostly pre-primary. So we are asking, are we giving these kids the right foundation to be able to sustain the primary journey? Because you go to certain counties, and I like mentioning Kwale County, because they have done a lot. By the time I was just visiting to go and see what is happening there, not like we've supported anything there, but we've just been engaging with them to be able to know what has been happening and what continues to happen and how can we work together. And you realize just within 10 years, the transition rate of within that county has increased so hugely. And we have so many girls attending education and completing, which is a huge factor for the nation. And when you go back, you ask, why is that possible? And the question is very simple. Focusing on the lower level, the early childhood education, where this is the period where the brain development of a child happens. And I'll throw something very personal to you guys so that you also get to understand. I personally did my class 8 at 20 years. I missed primary. I missed pre-primary. And I went a bit into primary, and I was one of those people that dropped off school
At Standard 4.
at first week of class 5.
Okay.
And I went to explore the world. I became a street child. I became all those things for like 7-8 years. Took another few years for rehabilitation. Then I'm hitting back to school when my counterparts are like 6, 5 years.
Yeah.
And so I have to capture everything. But because of being out there and getting exposure of the world and all that, it kind of makes you even sharper. But the thing is, did I have to drop out of school if I got a better foundation? And I have many other friends that this similar thing happened. And I'll try to draw you some level of statistics. In Kenya, for example, I just started by saying that we have an enrollment of 2.7 million children on pre-primary. Of this one, we have 1.9 million in public schools, and 8, and the difference is in private pre-primary schools. We are also talking of teachers, which is a main factor in ensuring these kids grow. We have around 92,000 teachers as at 2019. 53 of these are employed by county governments.
53,000.
53%.
53%.
Yeah, of this is.
So the 92,000 is the total number of pre-primary education teachers.
Yes.
Okay.
Then 47% are employed by privately. So here you realize in some ECDs, parents also chip in to make sure that their children are at school and teachers are paid. Now, that means we are at a ratio of 1:37. One teacher is to 37 learners compared to what the policy actually requires of 1:25. Now,
That is at the ECD level.
at the ECD level, we have not even gone to the primary level. And yet, this is the most important. Maybe I should also highlight for you why the benefits of the pre-primary.
Yeah.
Because that is very important. When you're talking of the dropouts and completion rates, all these factors up there, it all starts on how you build the child from the early stage, when their brain can develop and learn and acquire as much as it's supposed to acquire. So one of the main benefits is like they are likely actually to be in school throughout, because this is something that when you introduce to them early and they get to interact with it and understand the importance of it, chances of them dropping off is very minimal. We can reduce that by a very, very high percentage. It also develops resilience, because when you are introduced to learning early enough, as you continue learning, it's not a hassle. You don't feel like you're being pressured to learn. Yeah,
You enjoy
Yeah,
it.
you enjoy it, or it just becomes a part of you.
Right.
But when you don't do that and you just drop someone in class 1 or 1 year of nursery, then class 1, they do not still understand what this is. So the chances of losing it along the way is very high. And that's why we have a lot of dropouts, mostly in public schools compared to private schools. Because in private schools, parents are able to pay more to ensure from the early stage their children get the basic start.
I'm looking at all of this,
Yes.
the support that is being raised, these two principles in the UK today, having this funds drive, the organizations as yourselves who are here in the country putting this together, the situation on the ground, and then I look at the education policy, which is going to take a shift in the coming months,
Yes.
as prescribed by the committee advising the president of this country. And I'm asking myself whether all of these things truly are working in tandem towards the achievable goal of making sure that there's quality education within a reachable proximity to families around the country, and that every need for each institution is actually met. Is this something realistic right now? Because there's so many wheels turning at the same time. Is everybody focused on this goal? Because when we talk about quality education, it's not just that there is an institution in the neighborhood that has a library and has books and has quality teachers. It must be looked on globally. Globally, I mean collectively for the country. Is everybody working towards this? When we are seeing these funds being raised, is everybody appreciating that importance of saying, you know what, as a whole, this is where we are all going? Because for me, if it's not that, then it would seem as if everybody's working in silos and achieving their own goal without contributing to this bigger pie.
Actually, if you ask, we also need to give credit to government where it deserves. One of the most important thing for any institution is its legal frameworks and its processes. So, for example, you're talking of 844 moving into CBC, for example. And if you dissect it, the structure it's organized in a way that with the right support, it actually transitions smoothly, in the sense that from class 5 going upwards, they are still working under the 844 until they exit. But the ones coming below them, they are already in the CBC system, which is now, which brings them in. By the time their upper primary counterparts are done, the system will fully be integrated.
Yep.
But the bigger question we are asking for us is the global summit. So 20%, the global summit requires that 20% of each country's national budget be allocated towards education. Now, we are saying that is not just enough. We need around 10% of this 20% allocated to the education to go towards early learning. Because if we have that at that level, that means we raise the chances of more girls and boys to access these schools at a very, very early age.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to coordination, yes, I believe we have everything that it takes. The bigger issue is the eyes. The community still need to be empowered so much to be able to hold their leaders to account, because the leader is entrusted by the people, and this same leader is the one that oversees these resources when they go down. But so it's supposed to be that bottom-up approach where you're empowering the community to be able to also hold their leaders into account. The problem is, in most communities or in African countries, you see the politicians as the lords, and you have no power.
Yep.
Yet you have all the power to actually bring them to that position. So it's just a matter of using all corners to continue empowering everyone to be able to ask these hard questions.
If we now look at then, the way you've said, what should ideally be a budgetary allocation to education and to early childhood education? Of the monies that go to counties, 360 billion, right? How much is going into
Early childhood
education?
It differs. It differs a lot.
On average percentage?
Okay, now we are looking at 10%. We currently in the country, we are at 1.8% of the budget, that goes towards early childhood education.
Of our national budget?
Yes,
okay.
That goes towards early childhood education. So once that one is disbursed, different counties get differently because of course, the other factors that surrounds it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then it goes back to my initial question. If you look at all the money that is spent in the education sector, from the national government, from the money that goes through the county governments, from development partners and NGOs such as yourselves, can you see where the money actually goes? In terms of, you say there's a lot of infrastructure development. Is there really? Are there new schools that are built? Are there new ECD facilities that are built? Do we have more enrollment of teachers? Only 90,000 teachers have been employed, are currently employed. Do we have more children accessing these facilities? Are we actually getting the value for all the money that is going towards education?
Yeah, I will say yes, because I remember when I started by saying what people see in the communities. So, infrastructure, class, they are there. They are everywhere. The issue is, are they sufficiently utilized, and are they sufficiently located? I mean, strategically located, because we also don't refute the fact that there are many gaps in terms of its implementation. The policy suggests that each ECD is supposed to be around 2 kilometers space, radius within the community where these learners can access. But when it comes to implementation, we still have most of these ECDs within schools, within primary schools.
Yeah.
And it's a county function, but primary school is a national government function.
Yeah.
So you have the head teacher, who is an employee of the national government, who is overseeing a primary school, which has an ECD, which has, so there are those few gaps. In the policy, it is stipulated. In the implementation, there's still work. There's still a lot of work to be done, and that's why we keep requesting and pushing and engaging with the various stakeholders to ensure that this happens.
I'm listening to what you're saying, and as the saying goes, you have your work cut out for you. But let me ask a question that I like asking with regards to important discussions such as this one. What would success look like to you? Paint a picture of what all the effort that is put into ensuring that children get what is their due right. What is it that you'll see that if you saw in Kenya, you'd say, yes, we have succeeded?
For me, I think it is more of the ultimate. It's not at the initial level. For me, it will be how many students exit the institutions and are able to comprehend and organize their thoughts to bring value to themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, and because most people are still pushed to schools for the purpose of employment, because most parents, that is what they know.
Well, that's what they bank on.
Yes, that's what they bank on.
It's an investment for them.
Exactly,
as parents, right?
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So, the question you and I can even ask right now is, where are those jobs?
Yep.
Which job are you studying or running towards?
To go and do,
Yes.
right.
So for me, there's no success if an individual child later in their life cannot aggregate their experiences and their learnings and convert it into a profitable venture for themselves.
Yeah.
And this can be in employment. You might end up being a pilot, or you might end up being an entrepreneur. You might end up being anything. You can teach people various stuff. So for me, that is what matters. But then if I'm looking at that, the question is, where does it start?
Yeah.
It starts actually when it's like a tree. When that tree starts growing, you shape it to the direction you want it to go. So if we shape it to focus on employment, and you and I both knows that globally, white-collar jobs are not there. They are soon disappearing, because every other thing is taking precedence. And that is what is going to help both the individual and the nation.
To get the value of education.
Yeah, to get the value of education.
Let's end this conversation, Gilbert, this morning with what you actually shared briefly, but just give us a bit more detail. So you say your own experience, went to school, dropped out, then came back to school after 6 years, sat your Standard 8 exams at the age of 20. What was happening during this time, during this gap? And then how did you accelerate and pick yourself up to where you are today? In just about 3 minutes, I'm sure that's what we have, but
Okay.
it's sufficient for you to. People would like to hear that story.
Yeah, because of I was born and bred in Eldoret in my early years, one of the beautiful slums there called Huruma. And because of family issues, parent separations and all that, I found myself in the streets at the age of 10. Then, of course, I lived in the streets between age 10 to 17, transversing Eldoret, Kitale, Kapenguria, Lodwar as our surviving base at that particular time. And, of course, went in alone, came back for my younger brother, then went collecting more friends, because in that space you don't stay alone. So we ended up being 7. And survival down there is not easy, especially during our time, because this is early 90s. It was really tough. But along the way, we met a German guy who was like a missionary that rescued kids from the streets. And he approached us and spoke to us and convinced us actually to go with him in a rehabilitation center in Eldoret Children Rescue Center at the time. Then he taught us life skills. He didn't take us to a class. He taught us, all of us, the 7 of us, life skill. But remember, we were 7, but inside there were like 300 others, 350 other boys. Yeah. So everyone in that institution was taught how to sing, play music, masonry or carpentry or mechanic, all those things. Because the guy never believed in formal education. He believed everyone has a skill that they can use. Yeah. And luckily, I ended up become like one of the best, one amongst the best singers in the institution. So the guy started moving around with me in mobilizing resources. So he is called to go and meet a politician. I am among the the 3 boys that will go with him to go and sing. So by sheer luck, we found ourselves in the presence of the late President Muthui. And he really liked it, and he looked at me and he said, "You boy, you're too talented, but you need education. You need to go back to school." And that was like a trigger in my head. I was like, what is this school that the president is actually talking about? And so when we went back, this guy was actually in the process of creating an international singing team, so that now we moved to Germany and all these places to go and mobilize resources that used to come back to the institution to support food. There are many others that were going to school. There are a few others that were going to school because his wife, on the other side, really believed in education. So the bright ones were actually put in classes. Okay. Yeah, so fast forward, I moved from that institution to another one in Athi River, courtesy of the then PC in Eastern Province, who had been reached out to by the president. And I went to a children's home called Taraja, near Daystar University. Yeah, and that is when I went back to school.
So you went back to school at that point?
Yes.
At age 17?
No. At age 19.
Age 19?
Yes.
What class did you go back to?
I negotiated. Let's just say I negotiated my way to class 8.
That's a very interesting story, Gilbert. We'll have you here because there are very many things that we can actually derive out of that, your own experience in the conversation.
Yes.
Education, resilience, life skills, and very many other things.
True.
Gilbert Ngaira, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Gilbert is a local representative for Their World Children Global Charity. We're having a conversation about education and supporting education in the country. And as you've heard, he's shared his own story, not just of education, but of life. And you have many more to tell us.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.